All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to jump headfirst into something a little different, a little darker than usual. We're talking Counter-Strike, but not the pro scene, not the crazy clutch plays. We're going deep into the world of Counter-Strike gambling. And trust me, this is a rabbit hole that goes way deeper than you might think. So, to help us navigate this ethical minefield, I've got an expert with me today.
Glad to be here.
Now, before we get too deep, let's make sure everyone's on the same page. We're talking about those Counter-Strike skins, the cosmetic upgrades for your weapons.
Right, those virtual items that can be bought, sold, traded, and, well, gambled.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting, because these skins have created a massive parallel economy, a whole world of gambling sites that operate outside the traditional casino system.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get a little, shall we say, ethically ambiguous.
To say the least. I mean, we're talking about sites that are pulling in double the traffic of some major online casinos, and those casinos are reporting billions in revenue. So you can imagine the kind of money flowing through these Counter-Strike gambling sites.
Like, it's a staggering amount, and what's even more concerning is the accessibility. Unlike traditional casinos with their strict age verification and regulations, many of these sites operate in a bit of a digital Wild West. It's incredibly easy for anyone, including minors, to get involved.
And that's where the real trouble starts, right? I mean, we all know gambling can be addictive, but when you're talking about young, impressionable minds, the potential for harm is just amplified. That's why we're diving deep into this CoffeeZilla investigation he did, because it really exposes the underbelly of this whole industry. And the first thing that jumped out at me was the sheer number of people who started gambling on these Counter-Strike sites when they were underage.
It's a disturbing trend, and the research backs it up. Some studies suggest that up to 70% of Counter-Strike gamblers may be starting underage. Think about that. That's a huge portion of the player base being exposed to gambling at a very young age.
And we're not talking about 18, 19-year-olds here. CoffeeZilla talked to people who started as young as 12, 13 years old.
It's pretty shocking, especially when you consider the potential long-term consequences. I mean, the adolescent brain is still developing, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for things like impulse control and decision-making.
Yeah.
Exposing young minds to this kind of risk-reward system, where winning feels amazing and losses can easily be chased, can really set them up for problems down the line.
It's a stark contrast to walking into a physical casino, where they cart everyone at the door. These online platforms, it's like they're operating in a completely different reality.
Yeah, it's a digital Wild West out there, and unfortunately there are plenty of operators who are willing to exploit the lack of regulation for their own gain.
Like that whole CSGO Lotto scandal back in 2016, they tried to claim they weren't a casino but a sweepstakes to dodge legal scrutiny.
Right, they were exploiting loopholes and trying to avoid accountability. And sadly, that kind of behavior is still happening today.
So let's be blunt. This whole thing boils down to money, right? And CoffeeZilla's investigation really hammered home just how much money is flowing through this industry. He talked to casino owners, employees, YouTubers, everyone involved, and the numbers they were throwing around were just insane.
We're talking tens of millions, potentially even hundreds of millions of dollars every single month.
One casino owner even claimed his site alone was generating around $50 million a month in revenue. I mean, that's just mind-blowing.
It really puts the scale of this industry into perspective. And when you compare website traffic, some of these popular Counter-Strike gambling sites are pulling in almost double the traffic of a major online casino. We're talking about a major casino that reported over $2.5 billion in revenue in 2022.
So we're looking at a multi-billion-dollar industry operating with practically zero oversight.
That's the scary part. This lack of regulation creates what CoffeeZilla calls a race to the bottom. These sites are constantly trying to undercut each other, offering better odds, faster withdrawals, fewer restrictions, anything to attract more players.
And sadly, it seems even some of the casino owners who publicly acknowledge the ethical concerns admit they're trapped in this system. Like Monarch, the owner of CSGO Empire, he's been pretty vocal about the issue of underage gambling. But even he admits that he can't fully implement things like robust age verification without putting himself at a competitive disadvantage.
It's a tough spot to be in. They see the problem, they even speak out against it, but they feel powerless to actually do anything about it because of the competitive pressures within the industry.
It really highlights the need for some kind of external intervention, whether it's through legislation or more proactive action from Valve, the company behind Counter-Strike.
Right. Someone needs to step in and establish some ground rules because the current system is clearly not working.
All right, so we've talked about the accessibility, the lack of regulation, the crazy amounts of money involved. But let's shift gears now and talk about the role of influencers in this whole Counter-Strike gambling ecosystem. Because CoffeeZilla's investigation revealed just how influential they are in driving traffic to these sites and, in a way, legitimizing them through their sponsorships and promotions.
They are a huge part of the equation, and the money they're making from these sponsorships is significant.
We're talking millions of dollars a year for some of these top influencers.
It's no wonder so many of them are getting caught up in this.
And CoffeeZilla actually sat down with 3 different influencers who were actively promoting gambling sites. And their responses were, well, let's just say they were interesting. One influencer defended his actions by saying he enjoys gambling himself and doesn't try to sugarcoat the risks to his viewers.
It's a common defense, but it doesn't really address the underlying issue of promoting a potentially harmful activity to a young and impressionable audience.
Then another influencer, he acknowledged how addictive gambling can be, but then justified his promotion by saying it's inevitable, and he's just a small part of a larger system.
It's that old "if I don't do it, someone else will" argument.
Right, like they're absolving themselves of any responsibility.
It's a tricky situation because there is an element of truth to that. It is a massive system, but everyone within that system still has a choice to make about their involvement.
Then there was the third influencer, and he claimed he'd be gambling even if he wasn't getting paid, but then admitted his earnings from promoting these sites were, pretty substantial.
The classic, "I do for the love of the game, but hey, the money's nice too" argument.
Right. So you've got these influencers profiting from an industry that's preying on vulnerable individuals, many of whom are underage, and they're trying to justify their actions by saying they're just part of the system or they're not sugarcoating the risks. But here's a statistic that really puts things into perspective. Clash.io, one of these gambling sites, admitted that less than 1% of their accounts were generating 80% of their revenue.
Wow, so basically the vast majority of their profits are coming from a very small percentage of highly addicted players.
Exactly, and that's who these influencers are ultimately benefiting from, the addicts, the people who are losing control.
It's a pretty sobering thought, and it raises the question, at what point does ethical responsibility outweigh financial gain?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we're going to explore further as we dive into a specific case CoffeeZilla uncovered, the HypeDrop scandal. This one really gets into the nitty-gritty of how these sites operate and the lengths they'll go to skirt regulations and exploit their users.
It's a fascinating and disturbing case study, and it really highlights the need for greater scrutiny and accountability in this industry.
But we'll save that for after a quick break, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, so HypeDrop, this was a whole different beast. They weren't just offering skins as prizes. They were offering real-world items like gift cards, designer clothes, even luxury cars.
Yeah, it was a pretty enticing proposition, especially for younger players who might not fully grasp the risks involved.
They marketed themselves as a win-win investment opportunity, claiming players couldn't lose money because of their daily cases reward system.
All right, those daily cases were basically free loot boxes you got just for being a member, and the more you spent on the site, the better your daily cases supposedly became.
It all sounds a bit too good to be true, right?
Well, CoffeeZilla did some digging, and it turns out it was.
HypeDrop actually used that daily case system to argue that they weren't technically gambling, possibly in an attempt to mislead regulators. CoffeeZilla found a letter they sent to the Danish government, stating that because players received those daily cases, any losses would eventually be recouped, meaning no one could actually lose money.
It was a clever loophole, but ultimately it didn't hold up. In March of 2024, the site shut down, leaving many users feeling cheated and out of pocket.
And to make matters worse, one of the biggest promoters of HypeDrop was Juicy, that same influencer we talked about earlier.
Right, the one who claimed he'd be gambling even if he wasn't getting paid.
CoffeeZilla confronted him about promoting a site that essentially turned out to be a scam. And Juicy's response was that he never actually promoted the daily cases aspect of HypeDrop. He claimed he was just playing on the site for content.
But CoffeeZilla had receipts. He pulled up clips of Juicy straight up encouraging his viewers to claim those daily cases and bragging about how much he was making from them.
It was pretty damning evidence, but it gets even more complicated because HypeDrop had a sister site, CSGO Roll, run by the same people. And even after HypeDrop imploded, Juicy continued to promote CSGO Roll.
It's like, at what point does ethical responsibility outweigh financial gain?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what it would take for some of these influencers to finally draw the line.
Well, it seems for some, the potential damage to their reputation isn't enough to outweigh the potential profit.
It's a stark contrast to someone like Trainwrecks TV, another popular streamer. He revealed he was offered a whopping $300,000 for a month of promoting a gambling site, but turned it down because of ethical concerns.
Wow, that's a lot of money to leave on the table. It's refreshing to see that some people are willing to prioritize ethics over a quick buck, even when the sums are that astronomical.
It definitely gives you some hope for humanity,
Yeah.
but let's not forget about the bigger picture here. This whole Counter-Strike gambling thing, it's not just some fringe activity happening in the shadows. It's woven its way deep into the fabric of professional Counter-Strike, the esports scene.
You're absolutely right. Many top professional Counter-Strike teams have sponsorship deals with these gambling sites. It's almost become an accepted part of the industry.
CoffeeZilla even talked to one esports team owner who said the lower tiers of Counter-Strike esports are basically funded by gambling money. They argued those lower tiers wouldn't even be sustainable without it.
Which again brings us back to that race to the bottom dynamic we talked about earlier. With so much gambling money flooding the scene, it creates this uneven playing field, disadvantaging teams who refuse to accept those sponsorships.
It's like a vicious cycle, and then you have cases like FaZe Clan, one of the biggest esports organizations in the world. Back in 2016, they were allegedly secretly involved in a gambling site, and even now, their success is partly attributed to funding from another gambling sponsor.
It just goes to show that past scandals and controversies haven't really led to lasting change. The allure of easy money seems to be too strong.
But at the end of the day, we have to ask who's ultimately responsible for cleaning up this mess. And that brings us to the big guy, the one sitting at the top of this whole ecosystem, Valve, the company behind Counter-Strike.
Right, they're the ones who created the game, the platform that spawned this whole industry. And they've faced a lot of criticism for not taking more decisive action to curb the problem.
I mean, they've issued cease and desist letters to some gambling sites over the years, but critics argue those actions have been mostly for show, with minimal real impact.
It raises some important questions about their responsibility. Do they have a moral obligation to protect their players, especially minors, from the risks of gambling, especially when they're indirectly profiting from it?
It's a tough spot for them. On one hand, they created a game, a product. What people do with that product outside the game itself could be argued as their own responsibility. But on the other hand, when you have such a young player base and a thriving, arguably predatory industry built around your game, it's hard to just wash your hands of the whole thing and say it's not your problem.
It really boils down to a question of where we as a society draw the line between the responsibility of the creator and the user. And that's a conversation that extends far beyond just Counter-Strike. It's something we need to be thinking about in relation to all sorts of online platforms and technologies.
So we've got this complex web of interconnected issues. We've got vulnerable players lured in by the thrill of the game and the potential for easy money. We've got influencers incentivized to promote these sites because of the lucrative sponsorships. And we've got the esports organizations caught in a system where gambling money is almost essential for survival, especially at the lower tiers. And at the top of it all sits Valve, the company that created the game that spawned this whole industry. They're profiting indirectly, but are they doing enough to protect their players?
It's the big question, and there are no easy answers. But CoffeeZilla's investigation has definitely brought these issues to light. It forces us to grapple with some uncomfortable truths about the gaming industry and the role of technology in our lives.
It's a conversation that needs to happen, and we hope this deep dive has at least provided some food for thought.
Individual choices are important, but when you have a system that's designed to exploit vulnerabilities, it's clear that individual action alone isn't enough. We need a more systemic approach to truly address the root of the problem.
So where do we go from here?
Yep.
Is real change even possible in this world of Counter-Strike gambling?
That's what we're going to explore in our final segment, so stick around. We'll be right back.
Man, this whole Counter-Strike gambling thing, it's really got me thinking. It's just crazy how this massive industry has sprung up with practically zero oversight.
It is pretty wild, isn't it? You've got these young players, many of them underage, pouring money into these sites, influencers raking in millions from sponsorships, esports teams relying on gambling money to survive, and at the top, you've got Valve, the company behind it all, profiting indirectly but seemingly reluctant to take any real responsibility.
Yeah, and like we were saying before the break, even the casino owners themselves, some of them at least recognize the problem, but they feel trapped in this system that incentivizes bad behavior. Like Monarch, he seems like a decent guy. He even spoke out against underage gambling. But he admitted he can't really implement things like proper age verification without putting himself at a competitive disadvantage.
It's that classic tragedy of the commons situation, right? Everyone's acting in their own self-interest, even if it ultimately harms everyone in the long run.
So what's the solution? Is there even one? I mean, CoffeeZilla seems to think the only real way to fix this is through some kind of major system overhaul.
Yeah, he argues for either stricter government regulation or for Valve to finally step up and take a more active role in policing this whole thing.
Which, let's be honest, they have the power to do. They could implement stricter controls on skin trading, make it harder for these third-party sites to operate, really crack down on the whole thing.
They absolutely could, but the question is, will they? And even if they did, regulating an online industry that crosses borders and thrives on anonymity, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, it's like playing whack-a-mole. You shut down one site and two more pop up in its place. So what can we do? If government regulation and Valve taking action are both long shots, is there any hope for real change?
Well, I think the first step, and CoffeeZilla's investigation is a perfect example of this, is raising awareness. Exposing the problem, making people aware of the scale and the impact, that's crucial. It starts a conversation, it puts pressure on those in power, and hopefully it motivates people to demand better.
So it's about education,
Yeah.
about having these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. Maybe if enough people speak up, if enough pressure is applied, things will start to shift.
Exactly. And that brings us to you, dear listener. We've explored the dark side of Counter-Strike gambling, the players involved, the ethical dilemmas, the whole messy situation. But now we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
If individual action isn't enough, what the systemic changes do you think are needed to address the root of this problem? Is it stricter regulation? Is it holding Valve accountable? Is it changing the culture within the gaming community itself?
There's no easy answer, but we believe these conversations are essential.
So keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but we hope this has given you plenty to think about.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay curious.